Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We're going to do block 9 of the Sixpenny Memories Sew Along. And the block is just about finished here, but there it is. It's a fabulous block. It's covering things that we've already done. In fairness, it's just put them together. But, what you need, I've just dropped things on the floor, which doesn't help. So what you'll need for this block is 2 fabrics that contrast, or you could use tones of fabrics, remember. You don't have to use all one colour or all the other colour. But you will need a light and a dark, or shall we call them, I'm going to call them a light and a dark. I've used a light blue and a dark blue. Or you could use a background and the main fabric, whichever you want to do. But we'll call them light and dark because I think it'll make life easier. So, for the light fabric, you're going to need 4 3-inch squares, okay? And these are for your half square triangles. Now, mathematically, it should be 2 7/8, but we're going to stick with 4 3-inch squares. You're also going to need 4 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles. This is out your light fabric. You're going to need 4 2.5 inch squares, and you're going to need 1 4.5 inch square. So that's out your light fabric. This block will be 12 inches finished. Now, out of your dark fabric, your contrast fabric, whatever you want to call it, your main fabric, you're going to need 4 3-inch squares. You're also going to need 12 2.5 inch squares, and you are going to need 4 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles, and that's all you need. So let's get started, and I'm going to make the various elements with you, and then we'll whiz it together. This would make a fabulous quilt, I have to say. The first ones you're going to grab are your or you're going to grab a light 3-inch square, and you're going to grab your dark 3-inch square, and you're going to put them right sides together. And I'm just going to move you down here. So place them right sides together, and we're going to draw a diagonal line on the reverse of this. So I'm just using a water soluble pen, an aquatrick marker. It's the Prim aquatrick marker, and I would normally have my little ruler. These little rulers are great. They come in a set of 3. You get a 12-inch, a 6-inch and a 4-inch. They're just perfect to have in your workbox. If you're not confident about your drawing, you could just put the centre line across the diagonal like that and draw either side, and that would be your sewn line. So that's one way of doing it. Or if you're quite happy with your sewing machine, you can just draw a diagonal line down the centre. But can you see here, what we've got are 3 lines. So this ultimately will be the cutting line, and these 2 are your sewing lines. So we're going to take these to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew straight down both of those lines there. So it's, as I say, it's entirely up to you whether you just draw 1 line in because you're happy that you can do that, or you draw all of the lines in. So on your sewing machine, you're just going to come across and you're going to use a regular foot or a 1/4 inch foot. I'm using a 1/4 inch foot without a guide on here. The needle's going to be in the centre, and I'm using the Aurifil thread. And what I'll do is I'll put a link on, because I now know how to do all of this, a link on the bottom of the YouTube video, and direct you to where you can buy all of these things. The fabrics I'm using today are Quilters Basics. They come in a range of lovely colours, I have to say, pinks and blues and greens. And I just thought the contrast of the 2 blues was really nice. I've thoroughly enjoyed using these fabrics. So I'm sewing down there. Now, did you notice that when I got to the end, I just flipped that around? And I'll just take that out the sewing machine like that. And now what you've got are your 2 sewing lines. You possibly can see it better on there. You've got your 2 sewing lines, and then we'll have this centre line here. So I'll bring you back over to here, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut down this centre line. At this point, you can either use your scissors, or alternatively, you could take it to your rotary cutting board, but I just find it just as quick just to use my Prim Love scissors and pop those down there and cut. All right, so now we've got two triangles, two half square triangles, and we now need to get these cut to measure 2.5 inches. First of all, I'm going to press them, and I've got my 12-inch wool pressing mat, which, as everybody knows by now, I absolutely adore. It just sets your seams lovely, and I've got my wires all tangled up here, and I'm using the prim iron. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the seam, and then I'm going to flip the seam, the square open, and press that seam there. Do the same on that side, set the seam, and then flip it open and just give it a press. That's it. So now that's pressed, I'll just get rid of that iron. Just move my ironing mat over there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to trim these down to measure 2.5 inches. Now you could use your rotating mats at this point, or just your ordinary board. But what you're going to do is, let's get this so we can really see it. You are going to position the diagonal line of your ruler onto that seam, like that. And we're going to trim this. It's only a smidgen that's going to come off, but we're going to trim this down to a perfect 2.5 inch square. So, first thing you're going to do is trim up there like that, and then trim along. So that just gets rid of, can you see how much waste there is? It's tiny. And then we'll flip this over. Just check it's still in there. Yep. And now we're putting the 2.5 inch mark on the ruler on that corner, because I know it's a perfect corner. The diagonal line of the ruler is going along that diagonal seam, and we're going to pop up there and pop across there. So there you are, there's one done very quickly, and I'll quickly do this other one. So the diagonal line goes on the seam like that, and I'm making sure I'm within that 2.5 inches because I don't want to cut it too small, and I'm just taking an absolute smidgen off. It just gets rid of those dog ears as well, and it's a great way of ensuring that your blocks are perfect sizing. So takes the pressure off a little bit with your pressing and your sewing at this stage. And also I absolutely loathe and detest cutting 7/8 of an inch, which mathematically I would have cut these at 2 7/8 of an inch, which would have allowed the seam allowance on the sides and also the seam allowance up the centre. So can you see the amount of waste is absolutely minimal, but it's well worth it. So in total you are going to make your half square triangles, and you need a total of 1, 2, 4, 6, 8 of those. Yeah. So make your half square triangles. So that's the first part. The next thing you're going to do is do your flying geese. Now for your flying geese, you are going to need 2 of your dark 2.5 inch squares. So in this case for me, it is the dark blue. And you're also going to need your 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle out of your light fabric. So on the back of the dark triangles, what you're going to do again is you are going to draw a diagonal line. But this time we're going to actually be sewing on that diagonal line. So diagonal line on the back. Now if anybody's wondering why I'm using the Aqua Trick marker, it's so you could see it a little bit better. It's a water soluble pen. You don't want to put any heat next to it, particularly if you're using it on the front. But they're really good for applique, for embroidery. You know, they've got a lot of uses for them, and they just come off with water. They're smashing. So the diagonal line is now going to go from the top of my flying geese block to this bottom of the corner. And I'm going to make sure that all my sides are matched up, and I'm putting it on the left hand side of my rectangle. Okay, so the diagonal line is going along this line here. Now at this point you could pop a pin in just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and remember that you're sewing actually on that line. All right, so using the Aurifil thread. Now normally I would use a grey for dark fabrics and a cream for light fabrics. Sorry, I meant to bring it over there. Right, I'll just bring you for the next one. but I'm just using the cream, believe it or not, for here. So I've sewn on that diagonal line there. Now, the next bit is really important, I think. I don't want to be cutting this back rectangle at all. I want to keep that at the size of 4.5 by 2.5 inches, but I need to get rid of some of this extra fabric. So I'm taking this top bit here, and you can either do this with your scissors or with your rotary cutter and your ruler. And I'm just going to pop that on there, so that's on the line. As I say, I often do this with scissors and just cut up that line there. So can you see you've got that lovely? And all we're going to do is we're going to pop this back and press it. So I'll just grab the wool pressing mat again. And once again, we're going to set that seam. And then we are going to press it back. Okay, remember, press, don't iron. So the next one we're going to do is we're going to put this other square on that has it's a dark square with a diagonal line drawn on, and we're going to make sure that these three sides all match, but this time the diagonal line is going from this top corner to the bottom corner. Now it is overlapping, that is correct. Can you see as you're popping this down, this square is overlapping that previously sewn triangle, and we want that to happen so we get a perfect point here, and then you'll have your seam allowance, which will be 1/4 inch from that point up to the edge of your block. So again, you can just pop a pin in so it doesn't move, and you're going to make a total of 4 of these flying geese units. So if you're making all 4, I'm just going to take you around the sewing machine and take you up a little bit. So can you see we're sewing on the line, unlike the half square triangles, and I'm just going to sew down there on that line all the way to the end. Now you would be chain piecing if you were making all of these all at the same time. So I'm going to bring you back around here, and this time what we're going to do is we've got this part here. Remember, we don't want to cut at all that background 4.5 by 2.5 inches. Can you see where it overlapped? So there's my 1/4 inch up to this point here, and this time, just because I can, I'm just going to use my scissors and I'm just going to cut an eyeballed 1/4 inch. I've just made it a little bit messy there at the end, so I'll just trim that off so it's nice and straight. And then once again, grab the iron, set that seam, flip this dark triangle onto your background and press it. And the wool pressing mat really does set the seams lovely. So when you turn this over, if you can see any of your dark, then you could just trim it off. But you've retained the size of that background rectangle, so it's always going to be 4.5 by 2.5 inches. So you've made 8 half square triangles and you've made 4 flying geese units, and now we're ready to start and put the blocks together. And it's as difficult as that. And really the only thing that we're doing here is it's the way the blocks go together. So row 1, okay, is a dark 2.5 inch square, and then you've got a half square triangle, and it's the orientation of this half square triangle is where it makes a design. You've then got a 4.5 by 2.5 inches dark rectangle, followed by another half square triangle, and can you just check the orientation of that? And finally a dark 2.5 inch square. You are going to make 2 rows like that. The next row that you're going to make, it's a half square triangle. Check out the orientation of where your dark fabric goes, followed by a light 2.5 inch square, one of those lovely flying geese units that we've just made, then a square, a light square 2.5 inch square, and finally a half square triangle. And you're going to make 2 rows like that. Once you've made those 2 rows, you're going to sew those 2 rows together so it looks like that. When you've sewn those 2 rows together, you need to press them. Just set the seam like that, and then just get rid of that pin, flip it open and press. Okay, And once again, this wool pressing mat just does its job. And the wool pressing mats come in two sizes, a 17 inches by 12 inches and also the 12-inch square. I'm lucky I have both. I think if I was buying one, I'd probably go for the slightly bigger one, but then I could argue myself into feeling that, yeah, I like the 12-inch one as well, because it's a nice size to work with. It's a nice size to have just beside my sewing machine. So if you've got any bulk there, which I have, I'm going to trim that bulk in a second. So if you've got your seams, can you see the seams are very bulky here? And all I'm going to do is I'm going to snip into this seam here using my Prim Love scissors, which snip right to the end. Like that. Get rid of that. And that means I can flatten this seam out. Okay. I should have done that first. So what I'll do there, for some reason this one's just bulked up a little bit. So I'll just open that up, flatten that down. That's better. That's lying better already. I can feel it. Okay, and we'll do the same with the other one. Is just open that seam up. You could have opened the seams up all together if you'd wanted to. So we've done 2 rows like that. Now you need to do your centre row. And your centre row is again very straightforward. You're going to use a 2.5 by 4.5 inch dark fabric rectangle, followed by a flying geese. Now this time the flying geese, can you see, is facing this centre square. The centre square is a 4.5 by 4.5 inch square of your light fabric, followed by another flying geese, and finally a 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle. So once you've got those, what you're now going to do is we're going to lay rows 1 and 2 with the centre row, and we're going to flip one on top of the other like that, and we're going to get our seams and we are going to marry all our seams up. So this is where pins really come into it. So I've got a little bit going on. This bit here is just arguing, can you see? I'm just going to open that like that. And even though that's put a little twist, I'll just open that because I want my seams to lie flat ultimately. That's better. We can always fudge it. Always fudge it. So pop that onto there. Oops, what am I doing? Pop that onto there. Now the seams are going now in opposite directions. Pop a pin in. There's a seam here, which we're just going to get together. Like that. We'll pop a pin in. I'm using the Prim, I call them flower head pins. They're a flat pin, they're really nice and fine, and they're a long pin, so for quilting they're perfect. And I'll pop a pin at the end, and then here we've got exactly the same, and we'll pop a pin in there, allowing the seams to go in opposite directions. Pin in there, pop another pin on this side here, get those seams in so they are beautiful. We want beautiful seams. They're not sitting, it's not sitting quite as well as I wanted it to there. That's it, that's better. So the seams are sitting now lovely. And we'll just put a couple of pins in there just so it lies nice and flat. Okay, and I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. There you are. I'll have to physically move this. I'll get used to this tripod eventually. Over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew the full length now of that seam. So this block, as I say, would be great if it was repeated. It would make a fabulous quilt. But also, it would be a great stash buster because, as I said earlier on, you don't just have to use 2 colours. You could use tones of colours. You could use assorted creams or assorted, in my case, the light blues for the background. And for your main fabric, you could have used a variety of colours, really. You could have had one set of colours for that centre star, and then used another set of fabrics, get rid of that pin there, just arguing with it, for the outside. So really have a bit play around with this. This is one of those blocks again that you can just have some fun with. So once we've done that, I'll bring you back around here so you can see how we're getting on. We'll take those pins out. We're going to use those pins in a second. So there you are. You can see we're starting. Oops, there's another pin there. Didn't want to come out. It's starting to look good. And all we're going to do now is pop these other two onto here and do exactly the same and sew those together. So again, get the seams. Once you've got your seams in, everything else will fall into place, and just make your seams go in opposite directions so that they lie flat. Now, some people prefer to open all the seams. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You can do that, particularly the more pieces that you've got. It can be a quicker way of doing it. In patchwork, we tend to have the seams going in one direction. So can you see I've just twisted that because I needed it to go another way. I just put a snip in there, and I'll just make sure that that will fly flat that way. And then this last one here, I'm going to pop in again, just making sure that the seams are locking. Okay, and you will have a little bit of extra bulk because of the way we've done the flying geese units. We've not got rid of a layer of fabric. So yes, if you're perfectly confident and absolutely fine with sewing, and you know that your seam allowances are perfect, you know that when you trim that whole corner off, that you're going to retain that 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle in this case, then you could trim off both of those fabrics and you would have less bulk. However, the whole idea of these, the sew along, was to get you to build up your confidence, to get you achieving the best possible block, and by retaining that background, it certainly sets you on the path to being able to do that. Also remember that if your seam allowance on your machine is slightly smaller or slightly bigger, again, don't stress about it. Your block will fit together as long as you've used, see I've got a bit of bulk there, as long as you've used the same seam allowance all the way through. It just might come out slightly larger or slightly smaller. You know, it doesn't matter. It's your quilt at the end of the day. It's your project. So now I'm going to take these out, and then what we'll do again, remember, is set those seams. Do that very quickly and give it a press. And I know I've done this as a Blue Peter style, but this block does come together very, very quickly. And it's very, very effective. What I like about it is the fact that it looks so more complicated than it actually is. Remember, we've just done half square triangles and flying geese. It's just the way we're putting it together. There you are. I'll give that a good press later. Okay, so there's your block there. I'm just going to pop that onto here and let you have a look. Isn't that fabulous? So I hope you've enjoyed doing this block. It really is, as I say, a good scrap buster. When I talked to you about using different fabrics, you could have had one fabric colour for those points there and a different fabric colour coming out here. So please let me see photographs of your blocks and check in for our other blocks. Blocks 1 to 9 are now available on YouTube, and every Saturday there is a new block launched. So thank you very much for watching. If you've got any inquiries, just pop over to Sixpenny Memories, which is www.6six-penny.com. And until then, bye-bye.